Hey guys, it's Hunter. I'm here to basically explain the JavaScript code that I wrote helping Tyler out um, because it's easier to just talk it out and explain it and show you guys rather than just write comments in the code or type out a message. So Tyler says, "Hey everyone, one of my ideas for a project has actually stemmed from a need to work for a portable countdown timer. So he's trying to make it turn colors as the timer hits different times so I can get it started and get it to turn red when it hits 0, but no combination of logic I can come up with successfully sets the timer to yellow once the user input time has arrived." Um, so I'll show you what I have working here. Enter time in whole minutes. We'll just go with 1 for the sake of time. All right, we'll do 2. Enter time for the timer to turn yellow. 1, and then it starts. So it's displaying the minutes I put in as 2, and then it's counting down the seconds. And you can see in the console it's logging. I put it to log the seconds and what color it is. So I'll show you guys real quick how to see the console. So if you just open up any page in Google Chrome, this is specific to Google Chrome, but other browsers do it in very similar ways. If you right click and hit inspect, I know Firefox is the same, I believe, it will open up a console over here. And you can do a lot of things, but what we're looking for is the console, or these are the developer tools. What you're looking for is console, and this is where you can run JavaScript. So we're still in black, so it's about to hit the other time that you'll see in the code in a minute. So it's about to turn colors here right after it hits a minute. Okay, so it changed colors, and now it's reached the same time as the second input. So it will turn red when it counts down to 0. So in here, this is actually JavaScript, so you can run JavaScript in here. 2 plus 2 returns 4. And then this is just, you can, when you're testing and developing applications, you can see what it looks like, different screen sizes. So that's what the inspector or the developer tools in Google Chrome look like. Okay, so that's what this is. So I'm going to show you guys his specific issue he was having here, or his code he had here. So we'll go over this code and the code that I wrote. It's about to turn red, and it turns red. So you can see it logs the time here. It's yellow, and then 0, it's red. Okay, so how do we do that? All right, so let's look at this, and okay, so in Tyler's code, I can't see the HTML, so it's limited. I can assume what's up there based on the JavaScript, but he's taking in variables. So variable minutes or mins is equal to, and then that's the prompt that you're seeing. So it's going to prompt the user for input, enter time in whole minutes. That was the 2 that we put in. Enter a time for the timer to turn yellow in whole minutes. That was the 1. And then he's parsing this variable into an integer. And an integer is just a whole number, for those of you who don't already know that. And then he's taking a variable seconds and making it equal to this variable of minutes times 60. So he's just changing the minutes that the user inputted to seconds. And then he's declaring a variable timeout, and then assigning it a value here. So a declaration, then an assignment. In my code, we did this a little different. We declared and assigned all at one time. He's using set timeout to iterate through the seconds. and then there is a function color change that assigns the color it should be based on comparing the variables. So over here, this is the code that I wrote for it. So let's start with the JavaScript. So we're declaring variables, and I'm grabbing, so the way I'm showing it over here is I'm grabbing these spans in the HTML. I have spans created. Oh, sorry, they're paragraph tags. I have paragraph tags created, and then I'm assigning an ID of minutes and an ID of seconds. And then I'm grabbing, in the JavaScript, I'm grabbing those elements by their ID, so minutes and seconds, and I'm assigning them to JavaScript variables. So now minutes and seconds equal these elements in the DOM and HTML elements, which you're seeing over here. Okay, so from there, I'm also declaring variables much like Tyler did, minutes, and I'm going ahead and parsing that with the prompt instead of making it two different times. I was just wanting to show that you can kind of like tie these together. You can daisy chain them, if you will. So we're going to take and assign a variable of minutes that we're creating. So we're declaring a variable here, and we're assigning it a value at the same time. So we're going to declare mins and assign it a value of prompting the user for enter a time in whole minutes, and then we're going to, the value that is entered, so that's what's happening here. So if I put in 1, so now it's going to parse that into an integer, and so it's now we have an integer of 1, and it's going to assign it as mins. So when we use it later in the code, that is 1, an integer of 1, because that's what happened there. So the second enter a time for the timer to turn yellow in whole minutes, that is happening right here. So it's prompting again, and it's parsing it into an integer and assigning it to mins2 right here. So now mins2 is equal to 1, and well, we'll put 1. So now it's equal to that. So and then we're taking the seconds, multiplying it by 60. So now seconds equals 60 because mins equaled 1. And then here we're accessing our HTML elements. So remember, we assigned var minutes to that paragraph tag in the HTML with the ID of minutes. So now we're assigning minutes dot enter HTML. So we're telling it what HTML to put in minutes. And we're going to, this is a string interpolation. So it's basically just saying this is literal. So it's just minutes. And then this is where we can put in our variable. So we're putting in the variable mins from right here, and that's what we're displaying. So we're saying minutes, and then this is that variable. And then here we're grabbing seconds, we're assigning enter HTML to seconds, and then the variable seconds, which is right here. So this you're seeing here in the console, that happens with console.logs. So I'm console.logging secs, which is that variable seconds. So every time seconds is changed, so seconds, the variable secs is getting decremented by 1, so the opposite of incremented. So every second it's having 1 taken away from it. That's happening right here. So this is just shorthand decrement for JavaScript, and lots of other languages use this too. So secs++ would add 1 to it every time that code was ran. And then what we're doing here, console logging start countdown, which is happening right here. And then we're starting this. So I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but before we get to this, we're calling a function in here. So with JavaScript, it parses the JavaScript and it loads your functions before it starts to run your code up here. So even though we're calling color change here and it's not being created, the function isn't being created until down here, it still works because of the way JavaScript floats it. Okay, so we're creating a function color change, which is similar to what Tyler was doing here. And then it's if statements. So we're also setting, every time it runs this function, it's going to set the seconds to the seconds variable, which is how you see the countdown changing here as well as logging here. Okay, so if variable sex is greater than sex2, so that is the user input, the second user input in seconds. So it's comparing the first number inputted by the user and the second. So it's saying if the first number is greater than the second number, then the style.color is black. And that is accessing those HTML DOM elements and assigning CSS to them. So that's what this is doing. We're grabbing that ID dot style dot color and is assigning the CSS color of black. And then once this is not greater than 2, it's going to be else if seconds is less than or equal to sex2, then it's going to run this code. And this is here because even when it hits 0, it's still less than seconds2. So we want to make sure it doesn't, we want to make sure it gets out of this code block and into this one. So that's why we say else if variable seconds is less than or equal to variable seconds2 and seconds is greater than 0. So this is just the number 0. Because if it's not greater than the number 0, it's going to run in this code block. And that's how we get to else if seconds is equal to 0. Tyler, you had double equals over here in your comparison. So in JavaScript, 99% of the time you want to run triple. So when you evaluate a Boolean, it's going to be triple equals 0. And if you wanted to be not equal to, it would look like this. Okay. So once it's equal to 0, that variable, then it's going to run this code. So this is how you see the output changing here. So when you see the background go to gray and the color, I'll show you again so you can see it. So white background, black font, and then gray background, yellow, that's happening in these code blocks. So the JavaScript is setting the HTML elements. It's setting the HTML and the CSS, all using JavaScript in this function. Okay, so you can kind of see this, what's happening here. So that's what I'm calling here. I'm calling color change. So if a variable seconds is greater than 0, then you're going to knock the variable seconds down by 1. So if it was 60, it's going to be 59. We're console logging that variable, which is what you see here, 28, 27, 26. And then we're running this function, color change, which assigns the colors and the numbers in the DOM. And then once seconds is not greater than 0, it's going to run color change function one last time and then clear interval countdown, which is what we're doing here. So now I'm going to explain this. So we're declaring a variable when we're assigning it. So variable countdown is equal to set interval, which is a standard JavaScript function that you can call in any of your JavaScript. Set interval, and then this is the code you're running, and then this is how often you're running that code. So we're saying set an interval of 1 second, because this is a millisecond. So every second run this code. And then this is how we stop it. Clear interval countdown. So this is countdown. And then once this is less than, once this evaluates to not being greater than 0, it's going to run this code, running color change function one last time, and then clearing the interval countdown, which is stopping this whole block of code. Now we're moving past that, and that's where the code ends. So if you wanted to console log that, console.log code finished. And we refresh this, so now we're looking at, oh, here we go. If we do it one more time, 1, 1. So okay, so this is interesting. You see it log console.log code finished before it starts iterating through this. I can explain that, but I'm not sure this is the venue to do it, so I just wouldn't worry about it right now. I don't want to overload this video with things. So I believe I've covered everything I set out to cover. I will post this code. Tyler, I know it doesn't match up exactly with what you're doing, but I couldn't see your HTML. So I'm sure it at least helps you try to understand how you can do some things. And here I wanted to specifically point out the differences in what you did and what I did. So here, when you're comparing minutes.value to a variable, so you don't put quotations around variables. When you put quotations around the text, it makes it literal. So that the JavaScript sees that as literally what you wrote in here. So mins to int, not what the variable means. So not this, not what the user entered and was parsed into an integer. That's not what this means. If you take off the quotations, then it will resolve to that value. So that's a problem you were having there. So remember in those, whenever you compare, never write, well, in general, if you're writing a variable, don't put quotations around the variable name. That's for something you want to be parsed as a string by JavaScript. Let's see. Also, here you're creating a function. Okay, so we'll skip that. So here, function color change, and then you're putting in properties for the function. So that's a scope thing with JavaScript. So I didn't have to, in my code, when I did color change, I didn't have to give it any properties to use, because the scope, I'd already declared those variables outside the scope, which makes them usable inside the scope. The reason you would give a function properties to use inside of this code block is if that code inside was consistent. So it was just a function that you were feeding things into. So I think I could do it right here. So if you had function add, and then we're going to send in A and B. And then we're going to we're going to console.log A plus B. And then we're going to close this. So let's see if this works. So we have function add. So now we can call function add, and then we can feed those numbers, those properties of A and B, we can feed them in. So now we can feed in 4 and 5. So this should come out to 9, because it's going to take 4 and 5 and it's going to assign them where A and B are inside of here. So it will console.log 4 plus 5. We should see this come out as 9. Okay, so that's why you would do that in a JavaScript function here. So we're not doing that in my code, and that's why you just see it as written this way. Okay, I hope this helped, guys. Sorry if I overloaded you. It's a lot of stuff, and I hope this helps.